Good evening here from the Philippines, and good morning again to Sir Roland. I'm bugging you again because I need your thoughts here, and I'm running out of
Great.
and I'm running out of quotes because, believe it or not, and to this day, our our talks I've been able to use your insights, but this kind of big, the NBA trade deadline, which just happened, and I'm sure you kept tabs of it. Anyway, first, welcome, Sir Roland, and thank you again for obliging to my request.
Well, I hope I can help. I don't recall in all my years of covering the NBA such a dizzying deadline with all the different major players going around. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah. And, well, do I have to ask what was the biggest deal that caught your fancy?
Well, they're all big in different ways, but I think it emphasized some things. I could be wrong, but one truth about basketball, and fans in the Philippines and throughout Asia know this as well as anyone in the world, is that it's all about chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
And that when you have a team with great chemistry, we're seeing one now that has surprised everyone. The Cleveland Cavaliers have a great chemistry. And for the longest time, the NBA and all of American sports has labored under star power. And you can never underestimate star power. We see that for example, America right now is absolutely bug-eyed about American professional football.
Yes.
This is Super Bowl weekend here.
Mm-hmm.
We have an exciting young quarterback. We have an old quarterback who's finally getting his shot at a championship. We have the retirement of Tom Brady, but chemistry and charisma, I guess they really are the values we all crave in sports.
Mm-hmm.
But as we've said a lot of times, sports is a metaphor for all the things that we need in our daily lives. And chemistry in basketball is certainly a part of what attracts us all to the game. Having said that, two huge factors have invaded American basketball. One of those is the great age of player power. We have these individual players who are, quote, stars, who have more power than the teams have ever had. And so there's something of an imbalance there, not for all the players, just for certain star players. And some of them, it appears their power, their economic power, exceeds their power within the game. Or, it is competition. And competition, all questions about competition are resolved by winning. Somebody's going to win, somebody's going to lose. And so we get this feedback. I think that's the other thing that fascinates us about basketball or any sport. It gives us that feedback on things. But basketball is particularly interesting right now because it's got all the change in player power. And then we've come through a period where the NBA and its eagerness to make money threw out a lot of the defensive rules, used analytics to change how offense was played, so that we had this just absolute barrage of three-point shooting. And we are watching, this was designed by the suits, so to say, the marketing people in some ways, to make the game more attractive. And in some ways it's done that. The numbers jumped with all the scoring.
Yeah.
It left the old timers fussing that chemistry wasn't there all that much, that we had ball dominant guards, James Harden, and an array. Russell Westbrook, and they're magnificent, obviously, except for one thing. They just never could get over the hump winning. And we're seeing some of that with Luka Doncic in Dallas. And with the wattage and power itself of American basketball, with all the media and the agenda setting, American basketball has an outsized presence on the global stage. It's where so many players from all over the world come to compete. And so that's good, but we're seeing a rebalancing in some ways. The team with the best record, playing the best right now in the NBA, is the Phoenix Suns. They take very few three-point shots. And of course, during the crazy period we've been through, we saw coaches and analytical gurus getting rid of the mid-range game as a bad option statistically. And then the water sort of broke on this thing in last year's championship series, because the Bucks were able to deliver a championship with the mid-range game of Chris Middleton and the great play of the Greek Freak, obviously. And so now we're seeing more of this, and we're also seeing these very powerful players, powerful economically. They have these huge contracts, and these players are huge gambles. It's like a big hand of all-in poker where there are hundreds of millions of dollars on the table, and the players are the chips. And these teams are, some of them are wise in their gambling, others are not. Others are reckless. And so some of this, and I know this is a long answer, I apologize.
That's no problem at all.
Some of this is contrary to our values. We value chemistry, we value teamwork, we value great play, but we really value winning. And so the Nets have a magnificent player in Kevin Durant. They had James Harden, who has been a very powerful guy, a league MVP, who has been a mystery. And then they have Kyrie Irving, who, although a Duke University, a very fine university, a player for Duke University, he got to the NBA and proclaimed that he thought the earth was flat. And literally, I mean, this and so he's a goofball. There's not much other way to put it. And he has created chemistry problems because he does not want to get vaccinated against COVID. And that's a huge political football in this country. But it has been a problem. And the Nets, I picked them to as the editor of Lindy's Pro Basketball magazine. With all that talent, the Nets got close last year with their guys injured. Just on the great moxie of Kevin Durant. And so I figured this year, if you had to pick someone, you would pick the Nets. But their chemistry is terrible. It was terrible. It may still be. I don't know. And then the other great team that had terrible chemistry was another very talented team, the Philadelphia 76ers. And so Ben Simmons wouldn't even play after his terrible showing in the playoffs the previous year. And so that was drama. Both teams, the Nets and the 76ers, were these huge drama factories. And, you know, sometimes we love drama. If it's good drama, if the game's on the line and two great competitors are going at it, we thrive on that kind of drama. When it's a bunch of spoiled, overpaid crybabies, that's destructive drama. I mean, the media still never have sorted out the difference in the two. They just go the drama all the time. And so the trade deadline, the main thing that happened is these two teams traded drama. And the drama of Mr. Ben Simmons went to the Nets. And the drama of Mr. James Harden went to the 76ers. And so everybody is now having fun speculating on the unwinding of the drama. Will the 76ers, who gave up a lot, will the 76ers, they gave up a pretty good defensive team and excellent defending and pretty good, with Seth Curry and a pretty good perimeter scoring team. Of course, James Harden is a great perimeter scorer. Supposedly he'll be great once again in the screen and roll, and he may be a great fit with Joel Embiid. James Harden has been a ball dominant guy. A lot of the old school folks really frown on so much ball dominance. It's really not a thing that produces chemistry. So once again, we're drawn to the drama factory in hopes that bad drama will give way to good drama with those two teams. If I had my druthers, as they say, if there's something I'd rather do, my druthers, I'd rather sit and watch the Cleveland Cavaliers, a team that is inspiring, has risen up by virtue of great chemistry, that likes to share the ball, and also made some moves, of course. They acquired a very talented player. And who could easily be a huge factor for them and would be a good fit. And so we'll have to see. Now, when we go down south, you have another fascinating player and a fascinating international player in Kristaps Porzingis, teamed with Doncic down there. And he was a huge surprise that they traded him. In some ways it was a surprise, in other ways it wasn't. So it's been very interesting.
But actually, there's a lot to write about during the NBA trade deadline. I want to ask you, sir, what do you think about the Ben Simmons fit? I mean, will he be ready? Will he be a factor? Or I heard from one of the programs here, there was someone who said that the Nets might not be going for the NBA title anymore and prepare for the next season. I don't know if that makes sense.
Well, I think the real question for me, when we talked in one of our earlier talks, I said, I sure hope Ben Simmons has been in the gym.
Yeah.
Working on his shooting, getting confidence. I mean, literally shooting 1,000+ shots a day. He needs to shoot free throws. You're going to have basketball has numerous examples of the great Wilt Chamberlain just had a mental block shooting free throws. Shaquille O'Neal, some of the greatest players have had those blocks. Of course, they were big, powerful centers who were scoring machines. Ben Simmons is basically a point guard and a brilliant one and a brilliant defender, but absolutely running in terror from any shot that led to criticism he rejected. He was angry at that. That's why he wouldn't play this year, because his coach and teammates said out loud, he's got to step up and play the full game of basketball. He's got to take open shots. In tennis, they call it running around your backhand. If you don't have a backhand, you'll run around to the other side of the ball so you can hit a forehand. And that's fine if you're, going to play recreational tennis. To be a pro, you have to have the complete format. And so Ben Simmons will have to show whenever he gets on the floor that he has gained a new competency and a new confidence in, it doesn't have to be a huge offensive leader, but he has to be ready to take that open shot and live with the consequences. And so we won't know until we see that. Yeah. If he is ready, if all this time away from the game, he has gotten prepared for things. Chemistry also is about human psychology. And one of the things I love in the books I write, the books I write about Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant, Jerry West, the great Jerry West. Now I'm writing about Magic Johnson. It's the psychology of great competitors that fascinates us often. And, especially with a guy like Jordan or a Magic Johnson. And that psychology really is part of the metaphor of our own lives. And so we'll get to see some of this. And, we'll get to see these people in a new context, a new chemistry. And we'll get to see C.J. McCollum, the longtime Portland Trailblazers guard, is now going to be helping out the New Orleans Pelicans. Yeah. And he was under tremendous pressure there in Portland to try to do the impossible. And now he's in a place where all they need him to do are the things that he can do well with his perimeter scoring and his overall ability as a guard. The Pelicans badly need his guard play, and that will be his opportunity.
Yeah. Well, Simmons will be under Steve Nash. Steve Nash is a two-time MVP, and we all know he's a good point guard. Well, he can shoot. I was theorizing the other day, will he be an influence to Ben Simmons improving in any way? In everything.
Well, it's not just Steve Nash, it's Mike D'Antoni.
Mike D'Antoni, yeah.
Who's the assistant coach, who was Steve Nash's coach in Phoenix. Mm-hmm. And of course, their whole approach is based on great shooting percentages. Yes. And D'Antoni's theory is that you have to take all these three-point shots, that the mid-range game is wasted. And D'Antoni explained this to me personally. He doesn't even like back to the basket centers. He wants screens set on the perimeter and everybody diving. Now, they are very smart offensive people, and Ben Simmons is a great screen setter, and he probably can roll to the basket. They'll find new ways for him to get some offense and to get a comfort level. Will it be enough? I don't know. Ben Simmons obviously felt tremendous pressure in Philadelphia, and he recoiled from that pressure. Will he find a similar or a different pressure in Brooklyn with the Nets? Because it all comes down to that final thing. Can you win? Can you develop the chemistry to win? Yes, you're making all this money. Your family for generations will be wealthy because you are a top pick. You are a maximum contract player in the American Pro Basketball League, the NBA. And so, boy, if any one of us as a human could sit back and say, all I have to do is my job, and not only my children and my grandchildren, but my great-grandchildren and my great-great-grandchildren have an opportunity to share generational wealth because of what I'm doing. And yet it's hard, because Jerry Krause used to tell me, I had a saying, this is probably not appropriate to say on your podcast, but he said, you can take young guys and give them these contracts worth millions, and what you're creating is 50 caliber assholes. And, Jerry Krause was a different guy, but he spoke some truth there.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's hard for assholes to participate in team chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see. It's been absolutely painful to watch Russell Westbrook. Not that he's one of those assholes. He's a very stubborn guy,
Mm-hmm.
and a great player,
Mm-hmm.
but and a great assist maker. Russell Westbrook is in Los Angeles. But at some point, these 50 caliber stars who are making all this money have to find a chemistry that allows them to win and allows them to do things that contribute to the team. Hard to say where that's headed. The other notable thing, of course, is that the Lakers really weren't in position to do anything.
Yeah.
They got rid of their players and made this all-in gamble for Russell Westbrook. And it didn't just flop. They were looking at aces in their hand and thinking, we've got all these star players. But those aces in their hand are old guys. And they are stubborn because they're old. LeBron James, of course, is magnificent, but these other guys have very different games. And it just has not worked for the Lakers. It's been very painful. But I do think, as painful as it has been for the Lakers, these object lessons of what happens to players who won't compromise, who don't compromise, who really are hard-headed beyond belief, who are secure in not just in millions, but in hundreds of millions of dollars. I think it's an object lesson that doesn't keep you from getting embarrassed. You can be exposed as not fitting into a winning chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
And boy, nobody wants you then. You've got a huge salary, nobody wants to pay, and nobody wants to trade for you. You come to the end of the road, and this is where the NBA is in maybe a little bit of financial trouble coming out of the pandemic. I don't know. I'm not a guru. I know the NBA's finances heading into the pandemic were fantastic because all the fans were eaten up with stats and a lot of times instead of team play. And they would go ooh and ah over all the ball domination and scoring of players. But a lot of the new fans hadn't really learned chemistry and what basketball really is and what its traditional values are. But we are seeing the league making its way pretty swiftly back to that. These teams jacking up all these three-point shots aren't necessarily winning. Even the glorious, and I mean this, the absolutely glorious Warriors are trailing the Phoenix Suns by 4.5 games. And so we'll just have to see, but I'm all in for the mid-range, baby. I'm all in for chemistry.
Yeah. Well, I can understand where you're coming from. That's been something that's been forgotten. Well, you talked about them, but the Lakers hardly did anything. Does this mean that they're about don't have any more chances, or should critics write them off from even winning the NBA title?
There are certainly media critics in this country writing them off.
Mm-hmm.
I have always had a lot of respect for the abilities and creative energy of LeBron James.
Mhm.
I retain that respect for his game and leadership. But the Lakers have some things to solve. Of course, they can pick and choose among the players who are bought out in American basketball, the players in trades or whatever, and there are some of those out there. There's some speculation that the Lakers will maybe get some help because they really don't have much in the way of perimeter scoring. They just lack a lot of things. They don't have those good athletic forwards that you need in the modern game to defend and create. And so maybe they'll pick up some people in the aftermarket, when the vehicle has sort of been sold at auction. And so we'll see. Those are low prospects for the Lakers. If you think about it, if you're, let's say you're one of these guys in this trade, you've been a pro for 10 years and you get bought out and you can go with several teams. And there are the Lakers out there in Los Angeles. All that media pressure, all of that fan pressure, all of those difficulties to resolve. Would you want to go out there and get in the middle of that at the end of your career and be publicly humiliated if you're not some magician who suddenly saves the Lakers? And you're doing that for the veteran minimum? It depends on how much you need the money. And so, people make choices. There's an old saying in America, probably true in Asia as well. If you make your bed, you have to lie in it. And so the Lakers have made their bed. They went all in. They traded some nice players. And, the other thing that's been thrown around here in this crazy trade deadline is that teams are throwing around their future draft picks a lot. There have been a lot of future draft picks traded. And so we'll be analyzing the result of this trading deadline for a good while, I believe. There's a lot to sort out and unpack here. I don't think it'll be short on fun. I think we have some things to sustain us. Will Domantas Sabonis be able to revive finally the seemingly dead Sacramento Kings? Will things go big in Dallas now that Spencer Dinwiddie brings some more help? And I apologize for that.
That's no problem.
Now that Spencer Dinwiddie brings some more help, Spencer Dinwiddie going to Dallas, he's a guy that can really attack off the dribble. He's not a great three-point shooter, but he attacks. By virtue of his game. There's an awful lot of pressure on Doncic. He's very ball dominant. But they need other people that can score off the dribble. So there is a chance. And of course, Kristaps Porzingis, I was right there in Summer League watching him as a rookie. He was like some sleek machine. Just unbelievably tall, able to motor around. And Phil Jackson was kind of odd as the executive for the New York Knicks. And, word got out that Phil was thinking about trading him as the months rolled on. And he looked, Kristaps Porzingis looked like a really special player, and he is. And Phil Jackson was saying, well, these really tall players, they have health issues. And they always pretty often have injury problems. And everybody was going, what is Phil Jackson saying that for? You know, Phil could really throw a wrench with his mind games.
Mhm.
And, you know, in Dallas, Kristaps Porzingis really wasn't a good fit with Luka. It was thought that he might be, but
Mhm.
he really wasn't, you know, and he was in and out of the lineup so much
Yeah.
with injury. So Washington gives him a place to start over. Washington is a place that is long from Manute Bol on down the line has had extremely tall players that have fit in one way or another. Washington's a different place.
Mhm.
It has almost a different value system sometimes. And it'll be interesting to see because Porzingis is a fine shooter. And I think it'll be interesting to see if his game shifts and where it shifts in Washington. And it may be that it's a really good thing. You know, it's hard to completely know. Meanwhile, Dallas could be really interesting after the break. You know, it'll be interesting to see how the trade deadline benefited them. Davis Bertans, the excellent 3-point shooter, which, you know, is a big thing when you do have guards going off the dribble, like Doncic does. And so to have a guy like Bertans there, he went in the Porzingis trade. That'll be interesting. It'll, you know, at the very least, it shakes things up for a variety of teams.
There's also word going around that Goran Dragic might join them because he's gonna get bought out, right?
Well, you know, it goes back to what I said about the Lakers. Some people were saying, "Oh, he might go to the Lakers and help them out," and he could. But again, why would you want to go to the Lakers with all their headaches? Whereas, and you know, a lot of people think he'll just go back to the Miami Heat,
Yeah.
where he would, you know, where he was comfortable and really prized for a long time. And of course, the Miami Heat have the best record in the Eastern Conference by a whisker. They are playing extremely well. A lot of people think that the trades will put pressure on Miami and they won't play as well. I tend to think the teams that are trying to build chemistry on the fly are going to be the ones under pressure, but I could be wrong. We don't know. It'll be interesting to see where Cleveland and Miami settle in as the field realigns. Boston has made some good moves that probably will help things there. Already show signs of it. It's going to be interesting. It is crazy and dizzying. The many moves made. The thing I wonder is, will it be like this all the time at the trade deadline? Will it get this crazy? And I think as long as you've got players with all that power, like players like James Harden, and even Russell Westbrook, and power, I mean by huge contracts and sort of forcing their way in and out of teams, you'll have some of that. I think, though, at some point, the undercurrent of a Spencer Dinwiddie where he goes, or a fine player like Karis LeVert ending up with Cleveland. Man, I don't know. There's some real basketball being played in the midst of all this drama. And so I think the true fans of basketball, and there are so many in Asia, so many in the Philippines who really have a long relationship with the game. And so I think it's hard to fool those folks, those fans. And so I think it'll be interesting, see where chemistry and smarts, competitive nature, and skill takes these certain teams like Miami and Cleveland, who are fun to watch.
Spoke about James Harden. I'm just wondering, will there be a clash of egos with Joel Embiid?
Well, you know, basketball, even with the great teams, you know, the great Showtime Lakers with Magic and Kareem, with Jerry West and Wilt Chamberlain and Elgin Baylor, titanic ego and personality. And on a lot of these teams, the great Celtics teams with Larry Bird and Kevin McHale and Robert Parrish, these players are, you know, they are stars in a drama. And so they're more than a few drama queens in the NBA. But the point is, the very best learn how to manage the ego clashes and to get through it and win, because they sublimate those gigantic egos just enough. They sublimate their own games to the team so that you don't have to dribble the ball, you know, on and on and on without passing it. You don't have to be ball dominant. You have to be this or that. You're going to play basketball. It's a great game. It's been around a long time. It's not rocket science. Pass the ball.
Yes.
Cut to the basket. Be the open man. And above all, don't be afraid to defend.
Yes. That's another thing. Well, about Westbrook, I mean, before the trade deadline, he was benched for a couple of games. And then there were some, I don't know. Then all of a sudden, recently he said that he was having an injury or something. What is going to happen? What is he going to happen to him for the rest of the season? I mean, he has no choice but to play out the season. But
Well,
I'm speculating, sir. Correct me if I'm wrong. By the off season, he will be moving out of the Lakers.
well, we as fans observe the detail of the game and wonder about such things. You know, it's not unusual for a team to bench a player when he's about to be traded. Yeah. And these trades they're like poker hands. I hate to keep going back to it, but at some point you're dealing with somebody who's going to have to lay down the cards, and the cards are either going to be, yes, here's what we're offering, or no, we don't have a deal. And so they go up to the very last minute. And so the last thing that a team trying to get rid of what Russell Westbrook would want him to play a couple of games and get injured right before, to ruin a trade. Now, I'm not saying that's what happened, but it does happen often. I think Russell Westbrook is a very stubborn guy, a very cynical guy. And I know this from one of his coaches who used to call and talk to me a lot about it, who had really gotten worn out with dealing with Russell Westbrook's approach. I think he's got some soul searching to do. I don't know if he's the kind of guy capable of that. He seems like, when you get a view of his personal life, he seems like a good guy, a guy who's capable of soul searching and making some change. Certainly the one place that would force him to do that would be Los Angeles. You know, you can't walk in on that Lakers roster and act like everybody's beneath you. They got too many banners in the rafter. They've seen too many stars. Yeah, you can do that in another city that doesn't have all of that. You can go in and be all that someplace like Washington but man, you can't do that in LA. You got to come true. And so, like I said, lots of drama.
Mhm.
Russell Westbrook faces his share of drama this spring. So it'll be sort of, they have an old saying here in American religion, a come to Jesus moment, a moment of reality, a moment of facing the truth. And a lot of these big egos are facing that come to Jesus moment this spring. And of course, all the fans and all the media, there's a saying from drama that, the Greek chorus dates back to the earliest drama. And that's the Greek chorus in the open theater, or all the critics and people are hanging around ready to offer commentary. So all these guys face the Greek chorus. And that includes birds such as myself, with commentary and observations. But that's all right. These guys, that's why they get paid the big bucks, because they've gotten all of our attention. And they can't complain, oh, I've got all this attention, I've got all these critics. That's where your money comes from, fella. You're in an elite position among the 8 billion humans around the globe. Of those, there are billions that are happy for a little cold rice in the morning, occasionally a little rat meat. Outside of that, they don't have anything that you have. And so I welcome everything that can happen in this drama. I hope they all learn a lot of lessons. I hope the game continues to correct itself from the craziness of the stats mind and all the analytics and three-point shooting that sort of distorted the game. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't want to see a team like the Warriors play like they do, because that's a beautiful thing. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about everybody else just assuming they can do that to the game. They can't. You have to be really good to play like the Warriors do. And so I'll just be eager to see where it's headed. The one thing that comes out of this, a number of people have said, boy, this trading deadline was good for basketball.
Mhm.
I hope so. We'll see. I think so. I don't think it'll be a bad thing to see some of these stars become humbled. And some of the younger players who are emerging stars, who are attacking the game in their own individual way and trying to be part of a team, they'll be uplifted. And I think that'll be a great thing. So I'm optimistic. Pardon me.
Well, I just hypothetically, there were a couple of names being mentioned in a possible trade with the Lakers. John Wall, Dennis Schroeder, and Buddy Hield. If any of those trades would have pushed through for the Lakers, do you think it would have turned the campaign of the Lakers?
Well, the Lakers own this dirty laundry. They have to hang it on the line for everyone to see, because they could have had Hield, in a trade long ago, and they turned it down.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, all the critics, when they were turning it down, were saying, "What are you doing? You need what this guy has to offer."
Mm-hmm.
That pressure is going to be a factor. Now, Schroeder played for the Lakers, had a monster offer from them, and in one of the all-time boneheaded moves,
Yeah, I remember
turned
that.
down a huge contract to play for peanuts, and ended up playing for peanuts in Boston. And now, he's going to be one of one of those guys on the open market this spring,
Mm.
and that would be a logical fit. He already has history with those guys. They know what he can do. He probably is going to have a bigger role. And I think that he's eager to try to regain that money they were going to offer him. And so to me, that is the one that makes the most sense. There could possibly be others, but I think that's the one who might possibly work. And, you know, when you have guys like LeBron James and Anthony Davis, it's amazing how just one or two factors can take them from struggling to boom, right up there where things work. And so it'll be interesting to see what kind of money the Lakers would spend. I don't know, but they got egg on their face right now. The Laker management and ownership does with and the question persists, what are we going to do with Westbrook? Mm-hmm. But you know, a lot of that has to be answered by Westbrook. Just like with Ben Simmons. All the questions, nobody's going to fix that for Ben Simmons. He's got to fix that himself. And I'm hoping his time away from the game, that will be a great story because he has a skill set now, even without the offensive ability, that is important to basketball. It's got all that size and mobility, passing ability, all that defensive ability and smarts. And if he spent his time away from the game, getting right with his shot, that'll be a really good story. That'll be a story that resonates for a lot of young players who have so much athletic ability and emotional intelligence and smarts, and they just can't get that shot right. That will resonate with them because it is getting with the right shooting coach and then just volume of shots. It's a lot of work, and you got to really want it. It's work to get up the number of shots to become a proficient shooter. But all across basketball, we see the big men have been forced out on the perimeter, and they have been forced to learn to shoot. And all across basketball, we've seen some pretty amazing transformations in terms of big men having perimeter games. That will be okay. I just don't think the game should be played. They've got the game wired to be played one way, and they've designed the timeline, as we've discussed before. The great Tim Cone with all his triangle teams explained to me everything about what had been done to basketball. And fans everywhere, there are very few people in the world that understood all of this like Tim Cone. And I say that, I mean, it's phenomenal to me. And I would tout Tim Cone in the American press. I would say, this dude, somebody should be hiring him to run an NBA team. I think he certainly loves his life in the Philippines and wouldn't go somewhere else, I don't think. But he's a brilliant basketball mind, and he understands the game. And he had to give up on his triangle, and he's adjusted because he built his knowledge from the ground up the hard way, with that antenna picking up American broadcasts of games. And, he started out, it's one of the greatest stories in basketball, what Tim Cone did to make himself a great coach. And basketball often, with all its money and all its focus on glamour, sometimes it's just too stupid to realize an absolute gem. And I'm not saying this for any other reason than that I've observed that, and I've learned. I learned so much from the great Tex Winter. I consider, and Tim Cone learned from the great Tex Winter, but I consider Tim Cone to be one of the top minds in the game. I don't care where you're playing it or how you're playing it. And he's earned every step of it. And so if anybody wants to make fun because I tout him as that, make fun. But if you are, you're just showing your own stupidity because he is that good, Tim Cone.
Let me ask you, sir. Since you've been mentioning Coach Tim, if you were to be considered to coach any NBA team right now, where do you think would he fit?
That's a great question, and it requires a lot of thought.
Mm-hmm.
I think first of all, and you can't run the triangle right now in the NBA because they've cut the timeline down and they've cut the reset on the offensive rebound down. They eliminated the triangle. They didn't want to fool with that. In a sense, that meant they could never have another Michael Jordan dominate the game like he did. I think all these guys who are sort of ruined stars in a sense, they never found a way to win, and they just continue to be cynical and selfish. That was Jordan. Jordan had been in the league 7 years, 8 years, and hadn't won anything. And suddenly he had to bend his will and ego. There's a lot of ego and a lot of will with Michael Jordan, probably the most of anyone. But he had to bend that to this curmudgeonly old coach, Tex Winter, and this sly kind of hard to figure guy in Phil Jackson, beating the tom-tom in the locker room and all the Native American symbolism and weird stuff to sort of get on board with, And Phil Jackson sold Jordan on that. And so Jordan quit being a cynical dude enough to win 6 championships. And so with the way the NBA has changed its rules, the thing that made the NBA the object of so many fans around the globe, the object of the attention of those fans, the NBA has cut its own throat in some ways with all these things geared toward jacking up shots and pace and space. There's nothing wrong with that. If you want to run that, you can do it. You just shouldn't adjust the rules so that you have to almost play that way. And so it'll be interesting to see if the NBA wises up to some of this. Nobody in American media, I'm sort of, I'm just some old guy here in my dining room writing a book. And having done this a lot and talked and spent the time with a lot of people over the years, driving around in my Chevette diesel to go to basketball games all over, just sleeping in my car, just that guy. But somebody ought to call the NBA out on this, I believe. I think it's important for the suits to loosen their ties and think about what they've done, and that they really have, they don't have a way of dealing with these cynical, empowered players. There's nothing wrong with the players having this power. There's just not the kind of format for chemistry that the triangle offered. And so they've marooned these dudes out on the islands of embarrassment and shame because they're supposedly great players, but all they look like are cynical, hard-headed, selfish, aging stars who never won anything. I hope the NBA wises up and doesn't. It also endangers the teams who have to pay them all that money and not get what they need out of them. I hope there's an object lesson in all this for the NBA. I don't think there will be, but somebody has to say it, I think. And so I'm happy to do that because the NBA is a great game. It has been very good to me. I've had the great privilege of covering and visiting and interviewing so many amazing players and coaches. And I just think the NBA's made a terrible move, and this is part of the problem. And it's very simple fix. Go back to the old rules. Have a decent 24-second reset on an offensive rebound. That's the prize for an offensive rebound. You don't want a rush shot a lot of times, particularly when you get to championship play. And supposedly that's why we play all these regular season games, to perfect teams for championship play. That's why we play all these 7-game playoff series, so that the teams, when they get in the playoffs, will know how to execute. And so the triangle is one answer to that. They're certainly not going to get in a playoff game and run crazy up and down the floor constantly. Now they'll run, but even the great Lakers Showtime teams, which are great fast breaking teams, they had to slow up a lot because they had the great half court weapon in Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And so basketball needs to get back to its roots. And I think it'll help to begin to avoid this problem of what Jerry Krause called the 50 caliber assholes.
Well, actually, those rules are being implemented here also. And well, I don't know.
Oh, it's a global disease. It's like the rules changes, and this is, I shouldn't even equate this, but it's almost like a pandemic.
Yeah.
Once the NBA makes this change, it goes all over the globe. Tim Cone, the great Tim Cone, a great, great, great coach, had to give up his triangle offense. You couldn't run it under the timeline. That any smart person ought to understand that is a key fact. American basketball needs to drop all the snobbery, quit looking down its nose at the rest of the globe. It is a global game, and there are a lot of brilliant minds out there. And the NBA in some ways is doing this, to give it credit. It has opened up its arms globally, certainly opened up its arms globally to all the money that comes in. But it also needs to quit looking down its nose and start to realize that it's not just great players coming in globally. There are great minds out there, of which Tim Cone is a prime example.
So let's assume that everything goes back to normal. Where do you think he would fit? What would you recommend, rather? What team? With the current rosters they have?
I would like to see him go into a place and Philly has a good coach. Mm-hmm. And Steve Nash may end up being a very good coach for the Nets. So he's learning. Mm-hmm. But it would be fun but you'd have to change rules. So this is a huge gift. Mm-hmm. But first, I would say that Tim Cone could go into any team, and immediately make a difference. Now, there's a whole graveyard of coaches who tried to run the triangle at various American teams. It's not an easy thing to do. Mm-hmm. True. And these were not bad coaches. They just couldn't work. I would hope that Tim Cone could go into a place where a James Harden or a Russell Westbrook, and figure out how to make that work. That would be unfair to him. Mm-hmm. I would prefer he go into a place. See, I like Cleveland. They got J.B. Bickerstaff, Bernie Bickerstaff, the longtime NBA coach. His son is there. J.B. Bickerstaff is a true pilgrim of the game, as I like to call it. And he's done just an incredible job coaching. He's had to really earn his way up, but I would like to see a situation like that. It could be with a big, powerful star. it could be a place like Sacramento. I would say, from what I know of American basketball, it's going to have to be a place willing to have an open mind. You know, if you got the closed mind, I think it's tough. I obviously Tim Cohn's very close with Eric Spoelstra in Miami.
Yeah.
I don't know. The American game is so out of whack right now. But it just doesn't seem to me that the game is inclined to listen to other perspectives. But maybe that's changing too. Maybe the chemistry and the mid-range and the drop step and the post up, all those things will come flooding back into basketball. Suddenly you'll be allowed to run the triangle again if you want. If you want a running team, you can have it under the old rules. All those Phoenix teams were running teams back in the day. All of Don Nelson's teams were running teams, but they had to get away from them because playoff basketball is a different bird. And you can be a fancy Dan in the regular season, and if you're not ready to play a chess game in the playoffs with the old rules that required it, could be tough. So we'll see. I don't know. I'm just an old guy talking what I've seen and learned from great minds. And really, some patterns become obvious. And I think this trading deadline maybe is a moment that American basketball and the fact that the Suns are doing what they're doing, the way they're doing it, with Chris Paul as a mid-range guy and a brilliant point guard, and they're great coaching, just solid, smart coaching. Monty Williams, just fun, just good to see. And it's reaffirming. These are people who've paid a lot of dues, these coaches. Bickerstaff and Monty Williams, they've paid a lot of dues, seen a lot of the game. They know the game. And so I hope it all presents some clarity for the powers that be, the people who run the NBA. I hope it does. Who knows? But thank you for listening to my ranting and raving about it.
Well, actually, you gave me a lot of ideas to write again.
Pardon?
You gave me a lot of ideas to write again.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you for wanting to engage with me. That is a very special thing you do in engaging with me. So it's no small thing. I appreciate it.
And that particular things about Coach Tim Cohn, I'm sure the Filipino people will love to hear that. They're gonna read about that.
It's only the truth.
Yeah.
It's only the truth. And the people know that better than anyone else in the world. They've witnessed it all these years firsthand. And that's what it's about. The book Pacific Rims, I don't know if that's big in the Philippines, but that's a very good book and really offers clues, a lot of the clues about that particular important basketball narrative of Coach Tim Cohn.
I'm sure the people here were going to look for that. Anyway.
Yeah, they need to. The book Pacific Rims will create tremendous pride in the Philippines.
I think I have to look for that myself.
Right, right.
Okay, we talked about the players who moved, but there was one player who did not move, and he's in limbo, and I'm assuming he won't play until the end of the season. I'm talking about John Wall.
Right. Big contract.
Mhm.
I don't want to it's hard to lump these guys in. They're great players, great skill set, but it's hard to take these players who are traded off because teams need to remove their contracts from the books, and they put them with a young team. That's a hard mix. They're, you always have to have somebody who can stand up to people. Tex Winter always said Phil Jackson's a great coach, but he had to have somebody stand up to him and say, no, you're wrong, and that's a hard thing. You got a very willful, cynical, and I'm not saying that John Wall is these things. I don't know him. I don't have the background with him. There are some of the earmarks there, the circumstances more than the person. And he's been injured and come back from injury, and my hat's off to him for that. But I'm hesitant to include him in that group. I mean, the circumstances are there with the trading to a weaker team, all those things. I don't know. I always say this. If a player finds the right context, the right teammates, and it's a 5-man game, it's not like American football or global football, soccer. It's not like where you got a big roster. It's a 5-man game. If you can find that right context, then problems can go away. So my hope for John Wall is that before his career is over, he finds that right context. It's not the greatest tragedy in history. These guys make millions and millions and millions of dollars, as we said at the top of the show. So it's not like I'm sitting around at night worrying, oh, what's going to happen to James Harden and John Wall and Russell Westbrook. As human beings, I care about them. And, they obviously have great basketball skill. But hey, we all could use the money.
So before I let you go, sir, my final question. Did the NBA trades alter any of your projections for the playoffs?
Well, that's more of a wish list. I'd like to see the Miami Heat go back to the finals. I just like that story. And if they had to lose somebody, my wish list would be that they would lose to the Cleveland Cavaliers, and the Cavaliers would return just based on the fine work of that group, starting with the coaching staff all the way down. And so that would be my wish list for the East. And I know that's silly. It could happen. It probably won't, but it could. I wouldn't mind seeing Kevin Durant with that tremendous effort he made last year in the playoffs. I picked him to win it. So I guess if I had to, I'm going to go back and say, maybe Brooklyn just might do it. Kyrie Irving might give up the flat earth stuff long enough to let them win a basketball conference championship and go to the NBA finals. In the Western Conference, I think the true pilgrims are going to say, well, there's a lot of different nominees, but Phoenix and Golden State are a lot of the favorites. It's hard to say because but just the way Phoenix plays leads you to think if anybody can be smart enough and survive a 7-game series, and Chris Paul is certainly a true pilgrim of the game. So, you know, basketball is an emotional game. I'm a fan of the game more than I am of any one team. I'm a fan of the True Pilgrims. And so I could get excited over Golden State, Phoenix. I wouldn't mind Milwaukee again.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the Eastern Conference has got interesting teams. It would be great if James Harden rose up and found a magical chemistry there and things changed. You know, those are good stories. They're good for all of us because that's all these guys are, running around in their underwear. They are object lessons to us about what happens when humans get along, when humans work together, when humans respect and appreciate each other at a high level and are very skilled. And let's face it, that ain't just basketball. There are a lot of different things in life where humans do it every day. They don't get paid millions to do it. But whether it's a hospital or a school, there are places where magic happens. And the only good basketball is that it reminds us that there are places every day in this world where magic happens by people who get along and do it right. Pardon me.
All right. Okay, so I guess that's about it. Although there's someone who wants a shout out from you. He just
Okay, good.
Well, you know him. He just bought out your Showboat, The Life of Kobe book. Sir Henry Liao, he got a couple of your books, Showboat and Mad Game. You showed it to me earlier, and I told him that I was going to talk to you tonight.
Sir Henry, I apologize that you have to labor your way through my long ass books. Please accept my sincere apologies, but also my thanks for becoming one of my readers. There's nothing more humbling than someone spending hard-earned dollars on one of my books. I hope that those books, and they were written far apart, but both about Kobe Bryant. Mad Game was about the time I spent with Kobe as a young player when he was really struggling. It was published in 1999. Showboat is about Kobe and his long and ambitious career and everything he went through to realize his ambition. And so, thank you, Sir Henry.
Actually, we did a show the other night. It's also about the NBA trade, the trade deadline, and they got a lot of interesting insights on that. Him and Aldrin, I know you remember him also, Aldrin Magnai.
Of course, yeah, he's my Facebook friend.
Yeah.
And he's a true student of the game. That's just what I'm talking about. Basketball has become this thing important globally to a lot of people, and they study. Alvin studies the game. You don't have to spend 2 minutes with him, and the more time you spend with him, you understand. He is a serious student of the game.
Well, that's it. Thank you again, Sir Roland, for all those wonderful insights, and you've given me a lot of things to write. Actually, you'll be surprised until today, this day, I still refer to all our shows, the past shows. Your quotes are really very helpful in helping me. Anyway,
Well,
yeah, go ahead, sir.
I have depended my entire life on talking to people and learning. And I talk to people and they teach me. And really what it is just two guys learning from each other. And so that's a fun thing.
So any final words, sir, before I let you go? I know you have to do some stuff, especially for the Magic Johnson book.
That won't come out till 2023.
Okay.
And so just expressing my love and appreciation for all the many fans of basketball and my readers in the Philippines and everywhere. And it's hard to articulate how special that is and how much I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, sir. And most likely I'll bug you again before the NBA playoffs or something.
Hey, I enjoy the conversation.
Oh, the same here, sir. That's why I always love to get your thoughts on that.
Thank you,
Anyway,
Brian.
thank
That's
you
great.
everybody for joining or for watching us. It's been a pleasure with Sir Roland, and I hope you got a lot of stuff out of that, especially the one with about Tim Cone. Sir Roland, I'm telling you, that's going to be something when I write it.
Good,
All right.
good. You know, when first time I said it, I have to say a lot of people said, "Oh, what's crazy Lazenby talking about?" I know what I'm talking about. I know, and I believe me, I've been doing this a long time. I know when I'm talking to an absolutely great coach, a great mind. I have the ultimate respect for Tim Cone.
Well, I'll tag him to make sure that he reads it.
Great.
All right, sir. Thank you so much. I won't keep you long.
Brian.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Bye.